This week's podcast is sponsored by Voodoo Ranger. If you're looking for that perfect companion for a night around the table reminiscing of stories once told, crack open a Voodoo Ranger IPA and roll for sass. Check out the free virtual D&D games brought to you by Voodoo Ranger during all 9 days of PAX Online, starting this Saturday and running from September 12th through the 20th. And for beer news and occasional mediocre advice, follow @Voodoo Ranger on Twitter and Instagram. Voodoo Ranger IPA. Drink responsibly, live rangerously.
Hello and welcome back to the Dicebreaker podcast. This is episode 24.
Featuring Jack Bauer.
That's good actually. I was trying to think before we started whether I had anything in the chamber as a joke about the number 24 and couldn't think of anything.
I'll tell you who's got one in the chamber.
It's Jack
Bauer of 24 fame.
Yeah, that show that never seems to end.
It lasts exactly 24 hours, doesn't it? Isn't that the conceit of 24? I've never seen 24, if you can't tell.
I can almost guarantee that if it was slightly successful, they did more than they were supposed to.
Well, before we move on to discussing 24, which is not what we're here to do, let's introduce ourselves because we've introduced Jack Bauer first.
Yes, and
Yeah.
he's running late.
Yeah,
So.
unfortunately, KIEFER Sutherland not here replacing any of us. I, as ever, am your host, Matt Jarvis. I'm the editor-in-chief of Dicebreaker, and this week I'm joined by two of the team. I'm joined by Michael Wheel and Wheels.
Hello.
Michael.
If you replace me with KIEFER Sutherland, then finally me and David Hayter have a reason to meet up and talk.
Oh, that would be awesome.
And, of course, Alex Meehan, staff writer for Dicebreaker, also here.
I am also here. I don't know what would happen if you replaced me with KIEFER Sutherland. Maybe I don't know, I guess it would be more gruff and sort of, hard and serious.
I guess, when you do your, it's Meehan, and then you, look to the left and the right, he'd do that, but with a gun, like he's checking corners.
Yeah, just like...
Yeah. Oh, no, I don't have a gun, luckily.
Well, you're not KIEFER Sutherland, so that's fine.
Tim the Goblin played
I'm
by
not.
KIEFER Sutherland would be a very different Dungeon Breaker.
Can you imagine?
He'd look like that guy
my
out
goodness.
of Sin City. You know the one I'm talking about. The one who's all yellow and gross.
What was this? Sorry, I missed the lead into this.
Yeah, I just heard yellow.
Yellow gross.
I said I think he'd look like the guy out of Sin City.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I hate Sin City. I don't understand why it's popular in any way, shape, or
Is that the
form.
Elijah Wood character?
I don't
Is
know,
the-
but
the villain?
he's yellow and really gross, and I think Kiefer Sutherland would look like that, but green.
Wow, I mean,
So
it's
he'd
a
be
good thing he
Slimer
hasn't
from-
arrived yet, because that's not a very nice comment to make about KIEFER Sutherland. Mate.
He'd be Slimer from Ghostbusters, but in a burlap sack.
He's not here yet, so
Well, look,
Yes.
I mean, he hasn't texted me, so I assume he's still coming. So let's just, let's keep down the anti-KIEFER Sutherland rhetoric.
Well, while we wait for KIEFER Sutherland, should we chat about board games and tabletop RPGs a bit?
Yeah, let's do it. Why not?
yeah.
Let's kick off with what we've been playing. Alex Meehan. Let's go in reverse order.
Oh my goodness.
I say that every week, I change up the order, but every week I think I say let's go in reverse order and start backwards. So as usual, let's go in reverse order. And Alex Meehan, what have you been playing this week?
Put me on the spot. I have been playing a secret game that I can't really talk about.
Oh my
I'm just mentioning it to tease the listeners and the viewers that something is coming about a secret game, and I have been playing it.
I feel like they're constantly in that state, aren't they? If they don't know a feature is coming up, then it's always that.
Well, this one's particularly so, in board game world, to peek behind the curtain, because all of us came from video games at some point. Video games full of embargoes, full of kind of you can't say anything about this, or you have to speak about specific parts of this game. Most of the embargoes in board game world just don't exist. So when something shows up, it's like, well, do what you want with it. Talk about it now if you want. Talk about it in 6 months.
It's
It's not out for
here's this board
12
game.
months.
It came out 4 weeks ago, but here you go.
But there have been slightly more. So there's the secret game that Meehan is looking at the moment, and then there was Pandemic Legacy, which was the first embargo that I had in several years, potentially. And that's not out until October, I think, and that embargo was June time or July time. So that was like a weird kind of... Yeah, it was unexpected to suddenly have embargo. I wonder whether as board games get bigger, we'll see more of them.
Yeah, I mean, you would assume, right? But I think part of that comes from the fact that like they're physical products, so they have to be a bit more sort of most like small studios can't afford to just hold on to stock that long. So I think for most of the small studios, which is, to be honest, where most of the good games in this industry come from, they like as soon as they've got all of their copies ready, they have to ship them out because like they can't afford to pay for a warehouse. So
yeah, and it's
I guess it
unpredictable
depends
when
how
they'll
big
turn
they
up.
are. Yeah.
For some reason, when you were talking about, oh, you just gotta ship them out, I was imagining that scene from The Simpsons when Moe is like getting rid of all those pandas from his bar. Like, come on, scram, get out.
I don't know, get them out of here.
Yeah, so there's Secret Game, but luckily people won't have to wait too long to hear about it. Other than Secret Game, I have also been playing Roll for the Galaxy, the digital version, as Mr. Jarvis spoke about last week. I've got my hands on the Steam version, so not the mobile one, the PC one. And yeah, I've never actually played it before, so this is the first time I'd even played the game. And it is incredibly confusing to start with, because you just see all these symbols and you're like, I have no idea what any of this means. But once you get your head around what the symbols mean and do, it's actually quite straightforward, to be honest. Like, yeah, it's just roll a load of dice. Depending on what you get, you can do certain actions each turn. So you have to lock in a certain action, but you can also try and guess what you think your opponent's going to also do on their turn. And if you put dice into that action as well, then you also get to do the same action as them, which is quite fun. And yeah, I lost, obviously, but only by 3 points.
Was this against other humans or the AI?
Yes, this was Mr. Jarvis.
Well,
you have such little faith in me.
The AI is notable in Race for the Galaxy and Roll for the Galaxy because it's by Keldon Jones, I want to say. It's like a neural network AI thing, which I think is just a nice excuse where if you get beaten, you can be like, well, of course, it's a neural network. It's absorbing the entire internet, so
well,
of course
they did take the soul of a chess master and inject him into a computer. So
please kill me. No, I was playing against a friend who was also trying out, and we both thought that the what would you call it? The adaptation was pretty good. Like I said, haven't played the tabletop version. They had, and they said that it actually sort of like skips or does a few of the steps for you, which actually makes the game just go faster. So even though you're missing out on that satisfying feeling of rolling the dice and, you know, shifting through them to see what you've got, it does go apparently quicker than you would, you know, playing the tabletop version.
The problem with the tabletop version going digital is that they've lost the cups that come with the game. They no longer get free cups.
No, the game asks you to put the dice you want in the cup, but there's not even like a facsimile of a cup. It's just the cup is a space on the screen.
I haven't played Roll for the Galaxy, but I assume it's the loudest game on Earth because you're like rolling clattery dice around in plastic cups.
I feel like it must be beaten by Perudo or Liar's Dice, right? Because that is also cups of dice, but you start with like 12 dice and everyone's like...
If you play a fancy one, though, you have like a leather cup, don't you? So
oh, well, we never had leather cups in our house, Michael.
In my day, we used cans, tin cans that we found on the street.
We found snare drums and we filled them with dice and made as much noise as possible.
I made a cup out of bones of small animals.
I only have one eardrum left.
Gosh, enough ribbing, eh? Eh?
Bones.
And the other
Bone
thing.
joke for my bone fans out there.
Oh, you're not talking about Bones, the television
This one goes out to all the
series.
boners in the chat.
Oh, please.
You're not talking about the television series Bones,
No.
starring David Boreanaz.
No, nobody is talking about the television show Bones.
And neither should we. Ian, what else have you been playing?
It doesn't star Kiefer Sutherland, so axe it.
Yeah, we're not interested. The only other thing I've been playing is the Alien RPG, which you can now watch the playthrough of that on our YouTube channel. YouTube/Dicebreaker.
YouTube.com/Dicebreaker, yeah.
That's the one. I don't work in the video team.
No, but you've heard me outro
You've been on
a
the
video
internet.
about 400 times.
I have been on the internet, yes. Wheels GM'd, did a very fine job.
Wheels was Mother. Isn't that what it's called in the Alien?
Game Mother, yeah.
Game Mother, that's it.
Yeah.
Mama!
Mother is the name of the AI they have on the ships, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah. Which is often not like morally working against them, but, you know, gets programmed to work against them. But in this case, Michael Whelan was working with us to make a very fun and exciting...
To tell a fun story.
Yeah, a lovely story where Johnny played the most awful, horrific character.
Yeah. You start
Truly a terrifying, what's the word, impression of a truly terrifying man.
Yeah.
You start the game with a rival, and my rival was not meant to be Johnny as Wilson. And yet, almost instantly, all I wanted to do was find a way of having like his chest explode with some kind of chest burster.
No, it was really fun, actually. I'm a big fan of the franchise, to an extent.
As much as anybody.
Especially as they're making another film, apparently. God, beating the dead horse. But I thought it translated that feeling of the original Alien, particularly, which I like very much, really well.
Right, Ridley, stop. Sorry.
Oh, singers!
Took me a while to think of that one.
Sorry, we'll just edit it backwards to the point where it was funny.
Especially with the stress dice, I thought was really a really great mechanic, because it does sort of reflect in that situation you probably would be very stressed. That's an understatement, and so having those sort of both the benefit of being able to roll more dice, but the kind of the fear or the threat of them, having negative effects, is something that's been in RPGs for a while, but I've not seen it in a tabletop role-playing game until this one. So
yeah, I think most stress, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it sort of came from that Blades in the Dark school of thought that people have obviously like been using for a little while now. But I think the way that it works in Blades is very sort of mechanical and is quite sort of what's the word, like there is an intrinsic scale for when you start being like trauma.
Yeah,
and it's like that's not really how stress works. You don't just sort of like, oh, that's one more task, I'm going to go curl up in a ball now. It's more sort of like, oh god, I feel the stress at any moment. I don't know when I could snap, and that's very much how Alien feels.
Yeah, that's how that system feels, and I think it works really well with building that atmosphere, and like making you feel like vulnerable people who are not actually, meant to be in these situations, especially as none of us were Marines either. So, yes, very enjoyable. Mr. Whelan, do you have anything, or Mr. Jarvis, do you have anything else to say about the Alien RPG, seeing as you also joined in?
Why is this
It is one of the 2 games I played this week.
I think,
so.
you and I, Wheels, are essentially just... We are the same person this week for what we have played.
We've got the exact same tabletop stuff because we were in the exact same games together, and that's it.
Tag team!
Tag team, yeah, we are. We're a private party from All Elite Wrestling. So this, my favourite tag team. This is a really cool system, and I'm glad that because I've probably said it about 1 million times in this podcast already. My favourite thing about learning a new RPG is seeing the cool mechanics they've made, not just dumping the same stuff into a different setting. So the fact that it was very much like, okay, yeah, there's loads of fluff and loads of like pretty art of spaceships and aliens and stuff, but also we have thought about what it means to be a character in an alien film, and that's how that is reflected in the mechanics. There's some other neat little stuff as well around the book. Like there's like if you're doing group stealth, which is obviously a big thing if there's a monster alien running around, instead of everyone rolling individually like you would in D&D, the only person who rolls is the person who has the worst stealth stat. So you're only as quiet as the worst person in the group, which is really cool. And it also just sort of like alleviates having to do 1 million rolls and being like, oh, I got a 4, I got a 2, I got a 1, or whatever.
That makes
which is really handy.
A lot of sense, and I think it sort of mirrors that instance in like the original Alien, for example, and in Aliens, where people do things and you're like, why are you doing that? And in that scenario you probably do the same stupid thing as well, but I think having like that kind of, it's the person with the lowest stealth who has to do the role, I think that definitely echoes that kind of classic thing that happens.
It's the person at the back of the group like knocking a bolt off the shelf, or it's
Loli's going into a vent.
It's Pippin. God, I was going to call him Perry. It's Pippin in The Lord of the Rings. Merry and Perry. It's
Merry and Perry's big day out.
When they're in Moria and he pushes the dwarf skeleton down the well.
Yeah.
And then everything lands on their heads because of that, which I really like that as an idea. I really liked Alien. I was actually quite impressed with how like relatively slick the rules were. There wasn't a lot to calculate, and so it kind of kept the tension, because it wasn't like, oh, there's something coming at you, okay, now we need to add up for like what percentage of the shadows you're stood in, and how much you smell.
There was a like a sort of section of the rulebook about sort of combat and tactical stealth and all that kind of stuff, which was all based on like zones and stuff, which we didn't really get into because we were only playing for 2 hours, so we didn't really have much time. And I would worry that might slow it down a little bit. But yeah, I haven't tried it myself, so I couldn't really say. But my favorite thing about it was like it was another big book RPG, and whilst it didn't really do anything like ridiculously original, it still saw the systems that it was wanting to adopt and went, okay, but let's not just shove this in wholesale. Let's actually think about not only how can we improve on it, but how we can improve on it to make it feel more alien. Which is cool.
Yeah, let's not just put another D&D system over this setting.
Please stop.
Please, for the love of God.
All right,
please, Ridley, stop.
Ridley, stop. Meehan, is that everything?
Yeah.
Because speaking of really great RPGs, Wheels.
Yeah.
What did we play yesterday?
We might as well just talk to each other on this one, Matt, because so we, as well as playing Alien, we both played Agon or Agon or Agon.
I think John was pronouncing it Agon.
Yeah, which is it's by John Harper, the designer of Blades in the Dark, as previously mentioned, for the stress mechanic. And there's a similar thing in this called Pathos. But Agon is all about Greek heroes, like ancient classical Greco-Roman myths. People like Odysseus and Achilles and all of those big, larger-than-life characters.
Is there Zeus in it or not?
Zeus is in it.
Yes.
I can confirm he just Fs. Which won't make any sense to anyone at home, but that's fine. Yeah, so the way this game works is, and it's very, very cool, so you all create a character, and your character, like, your title is as much of an important stat for you as like your actual stats themselves. So instead of having like, okay, my character has +4 for strength or whatever, there are 4 sort of like theaters of conflict, which are blood and valor, spirit and resolve,
art and oration,
and cunning and wits. So one of those, they'll all be D6s apart from one, which will be a D8 when you start, and you can upgrade those over time. So basically, you're making a dice pool every time you do something. So let's say me and Matt are getting into a fight with a big angry snake. So we're like, okay, well, this seems like a blood and valor challenge. So we both pick up our blood and valor dice. But then we also pick up our name dice, because how famous are we? That starts as a D6, but it can upgrade to a D8 and D10 and D12.
Will it be the case that the snake will suddenly stop and go, wait, have I seen you before?
It asks for an autograph, and that's when you get it.
I autograph it with my knife. But then you also have an epithet, and you can have multiple of those as you proceed through the game. So, for example, my character was called Aristides the Lionhearted, and I was very good at spirit and resolve. So I was a very brave and stout sort of hero figure. So I collected all of those dice. So I picked up a D6 for Lionhearted whenever I was doing something courageous. And I picked up a D6 for my name, because that's just, me as a person, how like competent and how famous I am, and etc., how much weight my name has. And then also I pick up the dice for the theatre of combat we're having. If you've got like divine intervention from one of the gods because you've pleased them in the past, you can then also add d4s from them. So you pick up a big pool of dice and you roll them all at once. So instead of having like I do one little roll, then one little roll, then one little roll, we all combine to just do one big roll. You either succeed or fail, and then you also work out who was the best success. So there's a kind of like man of the match system. So it's like, yeah, okay, we all combined to kill the snake, but you got the killing blow. Or it's like, yeah, we all combined to convince the king to, let your people go or whatever, but you were the one who really twisted his arm, and he's the one who's...
You're the one that sung the song about it.
Yeah, you're the one who ended up getting... let my people go right at the end of the song. You got the finishing line. But that's sort of like how it works. But it's also really cool because the way that it sort of teaches you how to play the game is very much like a character stepping up to meet a challenge. So it's not just, oh, okay, this sounds like a strength conflict, roll these dice. It's, I am Aristides, pick up that dice. The Lionhearted, pick up that dice. And my blood and valor, blah, 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 will pick up that dice. So it's very much like it's very ritualistic, which is really, really cool. It's like you sort of assemble, and then like there's a lot of tension before the dice roll, because we were playing in D20, so we're going through like all of the steps in like these little dialogue boxes. Roll20, sorry, not D20. So it's very much like, okay, I've got this dice and I got this dice and I got this dice. Oh, I might spend that so I can get that dice on top. So you have like a lot of maths of like, oh, okay, well if I do this, I'm going to up my chances. But you do it so infrequently that it means you can just sort of like just spend a moment and everyone just go, all right, let's get a bit meta here. How can we get this done? And then the really clever thing about it is you basically go up through the result scores. So let's say that the target number we were trying to beat was 10. Matt rolled a 9, Meehan rolled a 12, and I rolled a 14. So we start with Matt, who suffers, and he gets to narrate like how he managed to fuck up or get bested or whatever. I just swore. Sorry, my bad.
Sorry, edit that out.
I'll bleep that. Let me write down a note. 1 sec.
What do you think we are, Wheels?
F word. 23 minutes. So and then Meehan succeeded, but didn't quite succeed in the best way. So she gets to say, oh, maybe Meehan puts her shield over her so I can leap over it or something like that. Or Meehan manages to like wrestle the snake to the ground so that I can strike the killing blow. And then whoever got that final one, so in this case it would be me because I rolled the highest number, I get to narrate like the finish and the big coup de grace moment, which is really, really cool. So like you get to sort of, it's very sort of action scenes almost. Like John Harper said that one of the influences was like Fast and Furious, and there's going to be a hack for that at some point, so you can play Agon Fast and Furious mode.
Do you ever die for family or not?
You probably, yeah. Well, you have bonds, so like you can spend bonds to get extra dice and stuff. So you can sort of call on a favor or like help out a friend or be helped out by a friend and all that kind of stuff. It's really clever, and like it is one of the most gorgeous PDFs I've had the pleasure of flicking through, because it's all got that beautiful sort of like ancient Greek pottery style art, but all in these like really colourful kind of gradients. And the character sheets are just lovely. They're like little it's almost like an SAT test where you're just like checking little boxes and stuff. So it's really like intuitive, and everything feels really nice. And then you just sort of like, okay, that's a dice. I imagine like if you're playing with your character sheet in front of you, you could literally just put the die on top of each thing that you have, and you could literally just pick them up and then just assemble your roll and put them back when you're done. It's really, really nice. You only do like you only have to roll about what like 5, 6, 7 times per island, and the kind of narrative arc that you have of it is that it's very much like the Odyssey. You arrive at an island, you try and help, you see what happens at the end, and then that island is lost in the mist. You'll never go back there again. So you kind of just like, it's almost like a series of one shots. It's really cool.
I thought you were gonna say it's like the Odyssey. You sail a ship around and generally be a really horrible person.
Well,
I mean,
you can
if you
be,
want,
yeah. I think there's rules for while you're sailing between islands as well, right? Which we didn't necessarily touch on, but to jump in, Wheels. I think some of the things that I really liked about it, because I really, really enjoyed it. I think we were saying this yesterday while we were playing. One of the nice things about it is it's unapologetically kind of larger than life and heroic. Yeah. Whereas like a lot of games now, if you play a kind of, if you play a character that is essentially like a Greek hero, like a demigod style thing, it can be quite boring in something like D&D because you're just good at everything. Whereas here, it's okay to be good at everything because it's less about you doing something like whether you pass or fail, and more to the degree of how well you do it. So like Wheels was saying, that kind of feeling of, okay, we're all solving this problem, but we're all kind of building up to that big push, and it does the slightly competitive element of trying to step in front of the camera and be the person that is the best really well. So you're working together, but there's just a like kind of slight jostling for like, oh no, this time it was my time to shine. And that bond system where you don't necessarily have to participate, but you could help someone else out, and that gives you a bond for the future that you can then spend to then get an extra die, which will then benefit you in the future. So by helping someone else out, you're kind of helping yourself as well.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's a really like fluid system, and I think my favorite thing about it, like you said, is the fact that like I've never rolled a success and be like, damn, because I succeeded, but I didn't quite beat everyone else. And we had this like I don't want to spoil the RPG, but we had like one character who wasn't, like, it was becoming a running joke that they were kind of screwing up a lot and just sort of like taking the back seat, but they had a real arc at the end because they ended up getting that like that big moment where they got the best success, and it felt like, oh wow, they're really stepping up and like all that kind of stuff. And like the best thing about that system is the fact that it's not just like it's not just like a sort of, oh, this is how it feels to play, but in the story that doesn't really come into it. Like, it is really important for these characters to be the person in the spotlight, because you're heroes. Like, you want myths to be written about you. So like when you finish a character's story, like whether they die or they get back home or whatever, the way that the sort of like character's story comes to an end, you add up the dice that you managed to level up. So like how big a dice roll was their name by the end of the thing, and how much glory did they earn and all that kind of stuff. And you work out how well they are remembered, and like how people will see them in history now that their story has come to an end. And if one of your characters manages to die like throughout the story, you have in the downtime, like you remember them and you talk about the great deeds that they all did, and you have like this almost like funeral pyre moment, and it's really cool. Like you do feel, I think oftentimes you play a game like D&D, you don't feel like a folk hero, you feel like a sort of a bumbling idiot most of the time, because like the system is kind of designed around failure, whereas with this, like you are a unit, like you move around as a cohesive unit. So as long as one of you succeeds, you all succeed. But it's like how it happened throughout, and like, sure, I failed, but that, that's just character development. Like I took a hit to the leg, that's gonna come back to bite me in the long run, but as a unit we succeeded. Or like when we went to this island, I kept getting that, that best roll for whatever reason. So I look like an absolute god among these people. And like, there's systems where you'll get like trophies from things that you've done. Because I've read through the book before we played. I was really excited to try it out. And obviously this stuff didn't come up as much because we were just doing a one-shot. But like, say that we, finished that adventure that we did, Matt, and we got some kind of like brass, mechanical trophy. We can bring that up later in our campaign and say, hey, I mean, look, I'm the guy who did this. Remember that? And people will be like, whoa, okay. As long as it's relevant. But you can only use it once, because if you keep being like, yeah, I'm the guy who did this, and everyone's like, yeah, we've heard that one before. Like, it's really, really like, it's, as you said, it's unapologetically about being a hero. And I think, like, because games like this, like D&D and all that kind of stuff, have come from that sort of position, it's now become almost like cliched to be like a really goody two-shoes character. And especially in this group, I think we tend to play more like either weird or actually kind of like bad characters, like anti-heroes, all that kind of stuff. Whereas in this game, like, I felt compelled to just be like, no, I'm a really good guy. Like, I go around, I really want to help people. And it's like, it was nice to just be a hero for once.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean there's no depth there as well, because you kind of have to... So to quickly, before we move on to news, like, the thing that I don't think we've mentioned so far is you kind of describe what you do after you see the result of the roll. So it's like, here's a thing that's happening, everybody roll. And that kind of sets up the order in which you resolve things from lowest to highest. But it also sets up, like, you don't have to say, oh, I'm running at them, I'm about to swing my sword, and then roll to see if you hit them with your sword. It's just like, here's the general premise of, like, the scene setup, roll to see how you do, and then depending on whether you used your epithet, which is your title, if you called upon a certain god, whatever it may be, you then describe once you know your result. So it's not like, I tried to swing and I miss. If you fail a roll, you can kind of describe that maybe you just, you didn't even try to swing, you just, something else happened. Or if you really succeeded, how does that then tie into using your epithet? So, if you use the lion-hearted die because you used your epithet, how does that come into what you did? If you called upon Zeus, how does that help? Which I think was...
It doesn't.
It did in our case.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it is really cool, though, because it is like... it stops you feeling like an idiot, like you do in D&D sometimes. Like, I'm picking on D&D. Like, this is, as I often do. This is like a thing that happens in a lot of RPGs, where it's like, because you, as Matt said, because you ask what you're doing and then roll in a lot of campaigns, it's like, I want to jump over the gap, and it's like, well, you didn't roll that, so here's what actually happens: you faceplant or whatever. So it very much feels like, I really want to do this cool thing, but I keep screwing up, and you keep having that. Whereas in Agon, it is more like, okay, well, here's the result you're gonna get, so how does that factor in? And you can see the picture of like, okay, yeah, I succeeded, but I'm like halfway through, so I can't do anything too spectacular, because then it will draw the limelight away from the big champ. So it's almost like you've got like a sort of script, and you have the building blocks, and then you're like, instead of saying, like I said with that shield thing, right? If Meehan wants to like hoist her shield over her shoulder so that someone can use it as a platform to jump up and do a big leaping attack, if you screwed that up, that also screws up the rest of the stuff for everyone else. Whereas, like, if you know that's going to happen, then you can be like, oh, I might do this, because I know that the person who's going to get the killing blow is coming right after me. So I'll do that so that I can make them look really good and also, like, fit into the story. And it's really, really nice. It means that you actually have a lot more agency over, like, how the story plays out without it being, like, we're all the GM kind of thing, Like, it's still GM'd, but everyone gets to really feel like they have a lot of control over how the story pans out, I think, which is really nice.
I think that's really interesting when you think about the themes of Greek mythology and oral storytelling. Because, like, Greek mythology is all about oral storytelling. I sort of spoke a little bit about this in the Pharos, the Mythic Odysseys of Pharos D&D source book, because it kind of touches on this as well. But I think it sounds like Agon does an even better job, because you're telling your own story, which in many ways is more connected to the history of oral storytelling. I would like to know whether characters have like things like tragic flaws and things like that, because the term hero, when it comes to like Greek mythology, as I'm sure Mr. Jarvis knows, as an enthusiast of Greek mythology, isn't really used to describe someone who's particularly moral. It's more like a term that's used to describe someone who has done great things, whether they're good or bad. Like it's just someone who's made myth and history. So I think it would be interesting to know whether those kind of characters can also exist.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like, whilst we did feel compelled to be heroic, I think, like, you can still... Because your epithet is completely up to you. So my epithet could have been lion-hearted, but it also could have been, the bloodthirsty, right? Or it could have been, like, the tyrant or something like
mine
that.
wasn't in the book. I just made mine up. It was like, okay, I kind of have... As long as I can justify it when I do a certain action, you can use whatever you want. So you could have that as a tragic flaw where it could be, the two-faced or whatever it may be.
Yeah, because, heroes don't tend to be deliberately evil. They just tend to have traits that cause them to make mistakes or do bad deeds, or they're just involved with some sort of god who just threatens them to do it anyway. So
one thing you might really like, Meehan, is I was talking about how how people remember you bit after your character's finished. You also look at the sort of the 4 areas of conflict that you've been leveling up, and based on the 1 or 2 that you either use the most, because you basically after each island you do some downtime where everyone says how they felt the other characters did. So you might say, I thought that Matt was really cunning on this island or something like that. So it'll be like, I'm going to give them some points in that. So you look at the 4 that you got the most and sort of tie it in with the... I think I'm saying this right. Please do correct me in the comments if not. But you tie it in with the... the Blood and Valor or Arts and Oration or whatever one that you used the most and got the highest dice in, and it gives you a sort of title that you can work around of here's how people actually remember you. So it's if you said that you're really heroic and you go around saving people, but actually everyone said that you were really bloodthirsty and you kept doing really warlike actions, then people might remember you as the tyrant, or the warmonger or something like that. Even though you as a hero, you wanted to be portrayed like that because you acted in a certain way, because you had those flaws as a character. That's how people will remember you. They will look back and be like, no, this guy was you didn't want to be in a room with him because you never know when a fight's going to break out or something like that. So it very much has that sort of thing of you can be just as much of a tragic hero as you can be an actual heroic person.
Shall
it's very, very cool. It's really cool.
Yeah. Shall we go barreling into news?
Oh, of course we can, Matt Jarvis. But before we get there, let's hear a word from our sponsors. Reserve your copy of My Journey to Catan, a new memoir by Catan designer Klaus Teuber, where he shares his journey from dental technician to world-famous game designer. This book is being published for the first time in English as a very limited edition. Each hardback leatherette-bound book is individually numbered and hand-signed by Klaus Teuber himself. If you have a games fan in your life, or just someone who loves stories about people who strive to follow their dreams, you could not find a better gift. Pre-order your signed and numbered copy of My Journey to Catan at catanshop.com/book. Only 1,000 copies will be printed of this special edition, so get your order in early.
We'll whiz through some headlines here because there's quite a lot coming out. So I think maybe the biggest one of this week, at least maybe the biggest or best known name, is there's a new Magic the Gathering set. And if that wasn't a name you already know, it's based on Dungeons and Dragons.
Whoa! I've never heard of it before, Matt Jarvis.
Somehow, this is the first ever full set of Magic the Gathering to be based on Dungeons and Dragons. I might be getting this wrong. I'm sure someone in the comments will let me know. But I always thought that Magic the Gathering was loosely based on D&D anyway. I believe it kind of span out of D&D initially.
Well, there's setting books for D&D that are based on
yes,
like Theros, right?
Yeah, so that's an
Yeah,
important thing to note here. Is it's not the first time they've crossed over. It's just the first time they've crossed over this direction where D&D is coming to Magic.
It's the first time they've slapped a logo on it. Basically.
So it's called Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. So as the name suggests, it is set in the Forgotten Realms of D&D, which in itself is a weird thing because then does that mean that the Forgotten Realms is a plane of Magic the Gathering? and therefore part of the Magic the Gathering multiverse, and therefore everything that happens in D&D is also happening in Magic.
Matt Jarvis, you're boggling me. You're boggling my brain.
Well,
I can't deal with it.
Hopefully this won't boggle
Right
you.
boggled.
It will be a full set. It will release next summer, so they've announced it plenty early. And it's actually replacing next year's Corset, which is kind of the, for those who aren't big into Magic, is kind of the, I guess, what would stand in for like the base game nowadays. So it's like a big set they put out. It's not necessarily themed around a very specific theme or a very specific gameplay thing. It's just kind of a foundation to then release sets on top of after that. So we just saw the release of Corset 2021 this year, but replacing Corset 2022 will be Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. So 2021 was released this year. It's like FIFA.
It's like
It's always a year ahead because
damn
otherwise it's
you.
already outdated. So yeah,
suppose,
it's
yeah.
a standard set, so you can use it. It will be tournament legal, and apparently it will feature new gameplay mechanics. I will clarify here. They haven't announced any gameplay mechanics it may feature specifically, but Zendikar Rising, which is the next Magic the Gathering set out this year, features a new mechanic called the Party System, which does draw from D&D's class system. So essentially, certain cards can have certain classes. I will find out what they're called. I think it's Wizard, Fighter. It's 4 kind of core classes that I now can't find anywhere. Cleric, Rogue, Warrior, Wizard. So, and if you have different characters or all 4 classes together, you will gain different benefits because they will form a party and grant you things in the game. So presumably you would think that will be part of Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, because otherwise what are they doing?
Yeah.
You know, they've explicitly said Zendikar Rising's party mechanic is inspired by D&D, so if they don't then put it in the D&D set.
It will just, you'll open it up and the entire set will just be what are they called? The shrubs.
God. Awakened Shrub.
Awakened shrubs, yeah. All of them are awakened shrubs. All of them.
I opened up my barn, it was wall-to-wall awakened shrubs in there.
They've gotten in again.
Bloody awakened shrubs have gotten in the pen again.
They also announced, because I'm going to be the one to steer this good ship back on course as we barrel through the news, they've announced the other sets coming out next year. So there's Coldheim, which is a new Viking inspired realm. There is Strixhaven School of Mages, which is a magical university featuring 5 colleges with differing powers.
I wonder what that's based on.
Yeah, so they're both out in spring. And then there are 2 sets, both set in Innistrad. So Innistrad Werewolves and Innistrad Vampires, which will both be out around the autumn time.
Oh, spooks.
So as well as that, there is a Time Spiral Remastered. So that's a remastered version of Time Spiral, which is a set from about 2006. Which I think is pretty popular.
Remastered? That's what I want to know.
Get your video games out of here. And then Modern Horizons 2. So they're kind of following up on 2 of the most popular sets of the last 10 years or so. So yeah, this is Wizards of the Coast, of course. They've laid out kind of what's coming. They also, as a little kicker on the end of this, they've said that Magic the Gathering Arena will be arriving on mobile soon. That's all they've said is soon. But they've said it will be before the end of the year, so presumably that will be in the next couple of months, because there's not much of this year left, thank God.
Thank God.
Yes. As a little fun one, well, I say fun, as one of those things where you go, huh? WizKids, the board game publisher, which also makes miniatures for the likes of D&D and Magic. Alex, me and you wrote this story, so actually you lead this. Because
I'm the expert on this. So yeah, WizKids are making a statue of Chandra Nalar.
Mm-hmm.
Please don't, say anything about my pronunciation that I don't really know. But she sounds like an interesting enough character from Magic the Gathering. Is being made into a statue. That is approximately, I'm trying to see, it weighs 21 kilograms, and I'm pretty sure it's like 5'6".
yeah,
What?
It's
I
quote
know.
life size. So and it's a cool grand, right? Or it's over a grand.
Yeah, it's $1,200. So probably around a grand.
I assume we're getting 1 cent to the office, right, Matt?
No. Yeah,
I mean,
so
as far as I know, we're not.
if you're into Magic, I guess there's something to spend £1,000 or $1,200 on. When you consider that Magic has individual cards that go for like points, tens of thousands.
That seems more like it's worth £1,000 than like a card from 1982 is.
Well,
Yeah.
actually, Wheels, Magic the Gathering was launched in 1983, so there wouldn't be such thing as a card from 1982. Thank
know,
you,
when I-
comments.
If there was, then it would definitely be worth a lot of money, man.
When I was writing the story, I was talking to a flatmate, and I was like, "It's taller than you." Yeah.
Chandra, though, is popular as far as I know. I mean, I don't think any of us are
You'd
like
hope, right?
massively deep into the lore of Magic. I'm surprised
I've
it's
heard
not
of-
something like Nicol Bolas, the big dragon. But if they make a life-size version of that, I guess that's probably going to be more and
If they
bigger.
made a life-size model of a character that you could buy, and everyone just went, "Who's that?" Then they've definitely screwed up.
Well, I've definitely heard of her before writing this news piece, and I don't play Magic, and I know not a lot about the lore, so
Yeah, popular Planeswalkers, it's Chandra, it's Jace, it's others.
others.
All right, moving on. The next story we've got is... Oh, gosh, the state of the comments. The next story we've got, Alex Meehan, tell us about the Seventh Citadel.
Ooh. The Seventh Citadel is a spiritual successor to the Seventh Continent, which is an adventure game that people seem to like very much. I've not played it. But it's like got survival elements and choose your own adventure stuff. And it's very kind of narrative driven. So the Seventh Citadel, which is again not a direct sequel, is set in a very different kind of setting, which is like a medieval, magical, apocalyptic land where there are evil trees and giant worms.
Oh my god!
Yeah, and it's like evil trees versus giant worms. Who will win?
Wait, which side do you take?
Apparently, you're on the evil tree side.
Whoever wins, we lose.
I, for one, welcome our giant worm overlords.
You have to. So you start off tending to these evil trees because you've been told to, and then you're like, this is a really horrible life. I want to escape. And
Should we stop watering? Should we stop watering the evil trees? No. Keep on it.
No.
They'll grow out of the
Would you
evilness.
rather water the giant worms?
This tree's all worms for you.
2 maggot booners.
Yeah, it's coming to Kickstarter on September the 22nd. The Seventh Citadel, and people seem to be excited for it. So keep an eye out for that. I believe there'll be some more information on the game released, sort of running up to that, and then presumably on the Kickstarter description. But yes, there you go.
There we go.
Worms versus trees, the game.
For the record, I like Seventh Continent. It's very much in the vein. I think they call it Choose Your Own Path because Choose Your Own Adventure is trademarked, and they are very diligent about protecting that trademark. The folks that make Choose Your Own Adventure.
Yep.
If you ever write a story with the phrase "Choose Your Own Adventure" as a descriptor. So yeah, Seventh Continent was like you explore little square tiles and then you discover things, and it had puzzles. And I think you could play as like H.P. Lovecraft and Phileas Fogg and things like that. There were real live individuals from like the Victorian age. I think
the H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah.
I want to say like Mary Shelley's in there as well.
Oh yeah,
It's like a
I'll
really
take Mary
it's like
Shelley.
a
Thank you very
who's
much.
who of kind of late Victorian.
She was great.
Yeah, it's a really cool game. It's a really great solo game as well. If anyone is looking for a good solo game at the moment,
Yes.
So yeah, it's cool. I'm interested about Seventh Citadel.
Yeah, the artwork's interesting.
Yeah, there was
I
some.
like some of it, and other bits I'm like.
That was exactly how I felt about Seventh Continent. So
I just scrolled through the article,
Yeah.
and the big
character
tree
cards.
thing was cool, but then
Yeah.
the faces were.
Yeah, you know which bit I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Anyway,
let's roll on because we're short on time. Let's roll on to this next story, which is a very quick one. There's a tabletop RPG currently on Kickstarter called Dot Dungeon, spelt
Yeah.
full stop or period if you're American, dungeon, like a file name. It seems very cool. It is a little indie RPG.
Period Dungeon, of course, being.
oh
Wales.
God, Will.
No, now hold on. Period Dungeon being the Pride and Prejudice D&D remake. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
I wasn't sure which way you were going to go.
No,
there.
let's steer away from that. So, Dot Dungeon, as it's known, which is probably why they called it Dot Dungeon, it's inspired by kind of massively multiplayer online games like World of Warcraft, and also isekai, the genre of anime and manga that includes things like Digimon, so essentially about going to a different world. And in this case, that world is the internet. It's
It very much reminds me of Hack. Do you remember that anime? Hack /
Oh,
whatever
yeah,
it was.
sure.
Yeah. I remember watching that as a teen with some friends. I don't think it was good, but I do remember it.
I think the thing here is it's interesting. So the concept of the game is that it's not about fighting things. It's more about connecting with other people online. So it's kind of they describe it as kind of a love letter to making friends online, connecting with other people that maybe you've never met in person. So instead of health, individual characters, you have a kind of shared pool of connection. And that can go up through actions such as sharing art that you've made or kind of writing
Memes.
poetry or memes. Yeah, exactly. Probably, right? It's kind of the equivalent of that, of like, oh, I like that thing and you do too. And
Yeah,
here we
I don't
are on
make
the internet.
art, I just find it. And
I just
share
put
it
Sean
with
Bean's
people.
face on
Who did
everything.
this?
But having said that, so it says that it's not combat focused, but the gameplay system involves having opposition to everything or everything opposing you. So when you roll off against something else that's opposing you. And that can be anything. So it could be like an individual person, or it could be, a group of people, or it could be the weather if you're outside and finding yourself in inclement weather or kind of having to go against the terrain, something like that. So it will have a die between a D4 and a D20, and you will have a stat with a die between a D4 and a D20, and you will roll your respective dice and the highest number wins. So that's how tests are resolved, is like a straight roll off. But it's a kind of interesting system, something a bit different, as we were saying before, to the usual kind of, I guess, D&D mold that a lot of games can fall into, although less so indie RPGs like this. So yeah, it seems really cool. But we will move on quickly. But that's currently live on Kickstarter and will be till October the 4th, if you're interested in checking it out. I think there's a free playtest version as well.
Yeah.
Let's roll on. Alex Meehan, this is a quick short one. What's happening with Wingspan?
Oh, so Wingspan, the digital version, has had a long and sordid history this year because it was announced early this year as coming out on PC and on Nintendo Switch in spring of this year, and then sort of nothing happened. And then just recently, another teaser trailer was released for the PC version, and it's been announced that it's coming out on September the 17th, I believe, which is next week. The Nintendo Switch version, I don't
That was a
have
big
But yeah,
Shrug
for the
for
listeners at
listening.
home, yeah.
I don't have a hoot of when it might come out.
Because it's birds, I get it.
Yeah, you get
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Don't you give
Wingspan.
hoots?
Well, just in case you didn't know, Wingspan is a game about birds, and you attract the birds into your habitats, and so you can get more birds. Because apparently, all you want is birds. Just
Why wouldn't you, right?
it should just be called "All You Want Is Birds."
All you need is birds.
Yeah. But yeah, that's what's going on with Wingspan Digital. So you can expect it on the Steam store on September 17th.
Cool.
All you PC people out there.
I thought you were going to make some kind of bird, like the
Boomer
the
joke.
cat lady. Cool cats and kittens, but instead it's brill birds and whatever.
All you cool kestrels.
Cool kestrels.
I really like puffins.
Good. Let's move on.
Yeah, that's a least popular bits to get than penguins. Can you imagine? I don't know. Maybe eating a penguin when it was. Anyway,
You've
Would
both
you-
selected birds that are book brands.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, toucans are pretty great as well.
toucans.
Yeah.
The Paragon Blade is a head-to-head fantasy
It
RPG.
sure
with
is,
just two
Wheels.
people from Trail of Cthulhu Maker.
It sure is, as you read this next headline. Yes, so there is a new game. This is another short one because there's not lots of detail on it. But Pelgrane Press, known for RPGs such as Trail of Cthulhu, The Yellow King, and Cthulhu Confidential, which all happen to be Lovecraftian horror RPGs, although they do make a few things also. They've kind of teased a new upcoming RPG, and the interesting thing about this is it's for two people, and two people only. So it's based on a version of the Gumshoe system, which if you're a regular listener to this podcast, you would have heard Wills and I particularly praise, which is very investigation focused. So it powers a lot of kind of detective games. And Gumshoe 121 is kind of a spin-off where one person is the GM, one person is a player, and it's almost competitive. So you are kind of working against each other, the GM trying to control the forces of like evil or badness, whatever it may be, and then the player obviously trying to solve various mysteries and make their way through. So the Paragon Blade is described as being a fantasy game that is kind of, they just say it's set in a fantasy land, the player will be questing across it, and it's meant to really be kind of embedded in classic fantasy. So swords and sorcery is what they describe it as, but then including elements of mystery because of the Gumshoe engine as well.
Because we haven't got enough of that, Matt Jarvis.
Well,
Swords and sorcery.
That's fair, but I will say that two-player RPGs is a really, really freaking cool space that I actually am really excited to see more stuff in. Because I've actually had some of my favourite RPG memories of just like me and one person playing. Like GMing for just one person is actually really cool, and especially because like, if most stories that you read will have one protagonist, right? Like that's the kind of story that most people are used to telling, which I think actually it makes it really, really fun to play. So that's quite cool, actually. I'm quite keen to try that out.
yeah. So as I say, it's built on Gumshoe 121, which has been used in Cthulhu Confidential and Knights Black Agent Solo Ops, which is kind of like a spin-off from the vampire spy thriller RPG. So it's a new version of that engine, but both of those games are also two-player. If you're looking for two-player RPGs to check out. But that's kind of all they've said at the moment. They put up an alpha, I believe, a playtest version, which you can sign up for until the end of October, and includes some kind of pre-made heroes and some pre-made quests. But as far as they've indicated, the full game will let you make your own heroes and quests. But they haven't given it a release date, and who knows when it'll be out. But if you're interested in checking it out, you can maybe get an early look if you go and sign up. So there we go. Let's finish off the news section with this monstrosity from Alex Meehan. Tell us about Captain Wondercake.
That's not a very nice thing to say about Alex Meehan.
I've been called worse, so don't worry. No, the monstrosity does not refer to me, dear viewer and listener. It refers to Captain Wondercape, a board game.
Question mark.
Where one player has to play as the Captain Wondercape, or helping Captain Wondercape, I guess, because apparently this hamster superhero has accidentally gotten themselves caught in a roll of toilet paper. And you've got to help them carry on with their life, I guess, by rolling out the toilet paper as long as you can without it ripping. Whilst other players assume the role of the devious Professor P who attempts to sabotage the toilet paper by flinging miniature poos at it.
Mhm.
And that is the game.
That is the game. It
also comes with what looks like a turkey baster.
yeah, it comes with a pipette, which I don't understand because that is far too large for those plastic poos. So I don't.
It's for the pee. It's for the pee.
Oh, is it for peeing on the paper? If you
I
make the paper
don't know.
wet, it might tear. Is that the
Cannot
idea?
confirm, by the way, if it is for the pee, but I'm just theorizing at the moment.
And it looks like, at least from the images they've released, it looks like it's played with an actual roll of toilet paper.
Wait, sorry, this is created by Uwe Rosenberg.
No.
What?
No.
Where are you getting that
Oh
from?
my god! I just scanned the article. I saw the words created by Uwe Rosenberg. I was like, what?
No, Uwe Rosenberg made a different game from this publisher, which is Hutch.
Oh, good lord.
No, don't worry. Don't worry. He's not gone down the toilet paper route yet.
They really lean on the whole WC pun though, because the creators are Carlo Emanuel Lavantasia and Walter Albert, and they kind of highlight their respective initials, which are W and C. Obviously, it's called Captain Wondercape, and they highlight the W and C in Wondercape.
Yeah.
And
Is
then
it the toilet, Matt Jarvis?
yeah. I guess that's
There you
what
go.
they've got here.
Yep, it's a hamster flying around with a toilet paper cape, and there's a person trying to throw poos on it. I don't know what more I can say to explain this to you, Matt Jarvis.
So, because there's not a lot more to say about this particular game, a couple of years ago at Essen Spiel, there was the opening ceremony meeting thing for press, and during that press conference, there were at least 2 or 3 different games about poo. Which were all highlighted and shown on stage. One of which was Flushing Frenzy, which is extremely bizarre and involves flushing a toilet until a poo flies out of the top and you have to catch it before it hits the floor. Because obviously you wouldn't want to pick poo up off the floor. That's disgusting.
No, you want to get it fresh out of the toilet.
No, it's to stop the poo, because you can wash your hands, right? To stop the poo hitting the floor, because then you have to wash a carpet.
Yeah, once that poo escapes in the toilet,
Yeah.
then you've got trouble.
It's worth saying that this is a children's game, Flushing Frenzy. So all of the kind of promo images for it are a load of very joyful children holding their hands out to catch a flying turd. If you've not seen it before, I would recommend looking it up, because every time I see it, it makes me laugh by how ridiculous it is.
The thing is, I understand that game so much more than this Captain Wondercape game, because
That's
you've
basically
got
just Pop-Up Pyro, right?
no, yeah, but also
You don't catch the
at
pirate.
least the only concepts you have to understand are it's a toilet and there's a poo coming out. Sure, that's not the most conventional thing, but
Oh my
here
God.
you've got to understand the concept of a superhero hamster who has a toilet paper cape, and there's someone throwing poos on it. This is
The lore, I see what you're saying. The lore is much deeper in Captain Wondercape than...
Yeah, I've just googled Flush and Frenzy, and I'm seeing. Not only did they go for a really textured poo, which is an interesting choice, but I've just seen, Matt, that there's a sequel.
Oh, is
called
there?
Flush and Frenzy Overflow.
no.
3 times the poop for 3 times the fun.
That sounds like something I would make up.
Its German name as well is Kaka Alarm, which is a really fantastic name. Yeah. So that was one of the poo games. I think the other one was Don't Step on It, Don't Step in It, which won an award a couple of years ago for most innovative game. And the game there is a large plastic sheet, almost like a slip and slide. And there are squishy plastic poos on it. And I think someone is blindfolded and has to walk from one end of the mat to the other without stepping on any poos. And I think that's the game. And it won, it was at some toy fair somewhere. It won most innovative game, I think, of 2018 or something like that. Recent. the same kind of years that things like Gloomhaven and Wingspan and whatnot were being released.
It was a lot more technologically innovative than Gloomhaven.
True.
Yeah.
How many poos in Gloomhaven? 0 poos.
Yeah, I'm seeing no poos here. But the thing is, I can make that game better. You replace the plastic poos with slugs you found in the garden.
Oh, that's mean on the slugs.
Yeah, but then you've actually got stakes because you really don't want to step on one of them. Because I've stepped on a slug with socks on before, and it was a really horrible experience.
God.
So yeah,
I
that's
imagine that's a pretty similar experience to stepping on a poo with socks on, to be fair.
Same. when you've got cats, things like that just happen.
So that's the poo game, Captain Wondercape, which I think is coming out, right? It's not out now.
It's coming out of the toilet. This year. It doesn't have a set release date yet.
Wonderful.
I don't know how many pounds you have to shell out for this, but...
Oh, God.
Right. Okay, let's move on. Should we answer some emails, none of which are thankfully about any kind of defecation?
Well, I mean, they might not be in the question. I'm sure we'll get it around there.
Wills, would you like to read this one from Patrick Rose, please, on Twitter?
Of course. Patrick Rose, also known as @DrugCrazed, asks, what mechanic do you think is underused in tabletop gaming? I Cut You Choose is mine. I can only think of Shitenu as a game that's used it. What mechanic? Oh, God.
Flying poo, not
Flying
eligible
poo,
for this category.
Why is that so funny?
There are a couple of games of I Cut You Choose, I think. What was is it a Piece of Cake and New York Slice?
New York Slice is
which
what
I think are the same game, but with
I don't know
different...
if that's any good. But...
different food items, or essentially.
Oh, God. I can tell you what's overused. I think there are too many deck building games nowadays. And not with a whole lot of innovation coming out of any of them. But yeah, I don't know about underutilized. I to be honest, I'm always more keen to see new mechanics than I am to see ones that I like to be brought back, if you know what I mean. But unless anyone's got anything they want to jump in with, I'm struggling. I'm drawing a blank here.
So it's not. I guess it's not like a shared mechanic as such, but I really like games that have some kind of like physical, almost like dexterity element. So there was a game called, I think, Coaster Park by Pandasaurus. And unfortunately it wasn't a great game, and its main failing was the dexterity aspect. So it was a game, I hope I'm getting that name right, where you build a literal roller coaster by adding parts to it, and then at the end you have to push a marble down the roller coaster and see if it makes it successfully all the way along.
Oh, that's cool.
It's really cool in concept and just didn't work in execution because the pieces didn't fit together quite right. So the marble could just come spinning off because they weren't quite, tight enough together to form a single track. But it was such an interesting idea and such a neat kind of like physical aspect on top of because you could do that as cards. You could be like, okay, I've built a roller coaster. It's 6 cards in a row and they show different parts of track. But the idea of actually having to think about like an actual physical aspect of I need to think about if this does a loop, it needs enough momentum, so I can't immediately put a hill afterwards. It's a really good idea, and I wish it had worked out. But I'd like to see more games like that just try something interesting and like very inherently, I guess, physical, because that's what the tabletop's kind of all about.
I love dexterity games, so yeah, more dexterity is well up my alley. I think a lot of dexterity games relying on flicking, and there's way more options for that. Like, there's one called Flip Ships that I like, which is like Tiddlywinks, where you're sort of you're kind of like doing that action to like send an arc over and land on. It's basically Space Invaders, or like things about like maybe like balancing things on your hand, all that kind of stuff. Like there's loads of different options. And to be honest, they should probably look at like these kids' games. Maybe not the ones where you have to catch a flying poo, but like there are like a lot of interesting sort of.
I think the title of this episode should be called "Catch the Flying Poo." You've played Tokyo Highway, right, Matt Jarvis?
Tokyo Highway.
Yeah, I've played
Yeah,
it very
like-
briefly, so Wills might be better placed.
That coaster game makes me think of Tokyo Highway, because Tokyo Highway is a little bit like that, in the fact that you have to build something to make sure that you can balance, the cars on top of it. I really like games like that. Like Junker is such a great game.
Love
And I
Junker.
really want my own copy so I can play it. That and Team 3 is really great. Yeah, I would love to see more games that take advantage of the physicalness of board games, where like everything isn't just represented by tokens or cards. And like obviously that's fine. Like I'm not entirely against the whole concept of that. It's just I think I would like to see more games that think about using objects in a really interesting way.
Yeah, it's the funny thing, right? It's like there are so many games now with miniatures in, so every game has so much plastic in it, but it's never used for anything more than cardboard tokens could do.
Yeah, or painting, and then you can move it around.
Yeah.
Like whereas I find the stuff in like a game like Junker much more interesting, because they're just coloured blocks. They're nothing incredibly detailed, but what you can do with them is so much more engaging.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, thank you for your question, Patrick. Meehan, would you like to read this one from @Beaker7771?
Oh, @Beaker771 says, "Hello to all at Dicebreaker. I love your channel and enjoyed the chemistry on the podcast. I'm a huge Dragonlance fan, having read many of the novels. It was these novels that sparked my interest in D&D and RPGs in general. I was amused to learn that it was originally a campaign setting created because D&D needed more dragons in their Dungeons and Dragons. Do any of you have a similar experience, supplemental material leading to playing a game setting? Are there any setting games that produce really good supplemental materials? Thanks, keep up all the good work."
I literally just as Agon came into my life and I was reading about it, I was also happening to be like in the middle of a game of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, so I was like well up for Greek stuff at that point. So that really got me keen to try it out.
I almost called my character Cassandra just because I love Cassandra so much.
Cassandra's great.
Let's see, supplemental material.
I think I've read a tiny bit of some of the Magic the Gathering novels, in terms of games producing supplemental material, but it just maybe because I don't, as proved earlier, don't really have any knowledge or investment in the lore, and just kind of find like a lot of those kind of tie-in novels a bit, they're not written to be they're basically written where if you're already invested in that world, it's a fun kind of romp through it. But I think coming in cold is a really hard thing to do. Going the other way, though, I think there have obviously been aspects where I guess licensed games don't really count, but I've certainly picked up certain games and maybe even enjoyed them more because I had investment in those worlds. Gosh, I don't know if I've ever read like a spin-off from a game and then got into the game itself. I'm kind of intrigued to check out the Arkham horror novels that are coming up, because Asmodee or Aconite or Fancy Flight or that group, they're putting out a lot of kind of adaptations of their various games at this point. Like Arkham Horror's got some books. I know that Android has had some in the past. They've got a Keyforge collection coming up, or novel. I think Twilight Imperium is getting a book somewhere. So it's always, but they're always more of a curiosity, I think. It's never like I've been like, got to the end of a game and like, I need to read more about this world.
I do think, I guess with Twilight Imperium, like I do, usually when I hear people talk about it, they do really love like the factions, like, oh, the Lion people are amazing and the Turtle people are amazing, blah, 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 blah. So I feel like maybe there is like a sort of, quite niche market, but like there is a small market for people who are like more interested in that setting. And Keyforge is quite a cool universe, so I could see people maybe being invested enough to read more on that.
I mean,
but I do think sorry, Karen.
Sorry, I was going to say, I remember when I heard about the trail at Baldur's Gate, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting, because I known about Baldur's Gate, and I was interested in in it. Like, I'd never actually played any of the games themselves because I am a little bit wary about going back to older PC games simply because I find it hard to gel with them sometimes. But like, I was surprised about how good it is. Like, I'm not a Baldur's Gate fan, so I wouldn't be able to tell you how good it translates the world, but it's surprising that a crossover that's so odd, Betrayal at House on the Hill and Baldur's Gate, two things that I'd never really think of together, come together to make something that works in terms of providing a different enough experience from the original Betrayal, while not leaning too heavily on the Baldur's Gate theme. If you're not hugely familiar with it, it's more like, oh, this is kind of novel, and it provides a different feel to it, more like dark fantasy rather than straight up silly horror like Betrayal does. So
yeah, I suppose it's fun. Like, speaking of Baldur's Gate, I played so much Baldur's Gate, the video games, when I was growing up, like hundreds of hours, thousands of hours probably.
Same.
But again, just never got into D&D for it. And my first fancy RPG was Pathfinder. So for whatever reason, I didn't play a load of Baldur's Gate and go, now I should play D&D. Instead, it was just a kind of like, oh, right. Like later on realizing that, oh, yeah, that is that.
Yeah, because Baldur's Gate, it's not just like, oh, this is like D&D. It is D&D. Like, it's one of the several classic, PC RPGs that were based within the Dungeons and Dragons world, like Neverwinter Nights, Baldur's Gate, and Planescape Torment, which I actually bought and attempted to play.
Planescape Torment is hard to get into now, but it is fantastic. Like, it is one of the best written games ever made, I think. But
so
I can understand why you would bounce right off of it.
I started playing it, and then I did something I didn't mean to do, and now I'm in trouble, and I don't really know what to do.
That could be any day in your life.
But yeah, I can imagine a lot of people got into D&D just through playing those video games, because like I can imagine the modern equivalent is something like Divinity, which technically isn't set in the world of D&D, but it's very very D&D in the sense that, like, your attacks are percentage based, in the sense that it's turn based as well.
Well, I mean, even to the point that the devs are now making Baldur's Gate 3, right?
Yeah,
so
they are. They're making.
Yeah.
They just stuck a D20 on it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, weirdly, like, so I absolutely adore Baldur's Gate 2. Like, it's one of my favorite games ever. Like, I can still quote some of the stupid little lines that, like, NPCs make. Like the little dwarven guys that you meet in the opening dungeon. It's like, me temper's bad enough, but that just bother me all the time. Like, it's just like loads of little bits like that have just been ingrained in my head. So when I heard that Baldur's Gate 3 was coming out, I was like, oh, amazing. And then when I saw that it was Larian making it, like, I love Div, I was like, oh, incredible, this is going to be great. But now, like, the more and more that I play D&D itself, and knowing that it's going to be based on D&D 5th edition, the more I'm like, do you know what I mean? Like,
the thing is, I will say this, I think a video game will make that system much better, because it's running through a lot of the admin rubbish for you, and I just think, like, I do really like Divinity. I will say one of the things that kind of aside from the terrible difficulty curve of that game, is also the fact that, because it is pretty much based on D&D, sometimes the combat can be very dry and slow. But, like, I honestly still think, like, playing combat in that fashion is way better than playing it in tabletop form. So
and it's also like, you have control of the whole party, so you can actually, like, set things up rather than just waiting for your turn and all that kind of stuff. But I do think, weirdly, like, D&D, obviously predating video games, almost like was made to be made into video games more than it was to actually be played around a table when it comes to combat and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's,
yeah,
it's really odd.
Anyway.
Cool. All right.
We kind of roundabout answered that question.
Yeah, we kind of got there in the end. a little bit off track for this podcast is pretty good going. Here's one from Brian McNiff. If you could play a game with anyone ever, who's at the table and what are you playing?
Oh my goodness. I think I would be playing with Kate Bush. And I think we would be playing like maybe like a role-playing game that really allows her to fully express all her creativity and weirdness. Either that or like Telestrations. I think I just want to like, one, be at the same table as her, and two, see what she could come up with in that kind of situation.
Kate, not another picture of Heathcliff. Come on.
No, stop drawing yourself as a donkey. Come on, we've seen that one before. I imagine it would either be really fun and interesting, or kind of a bit boring, but I'm still getting to talk to Kate Bush. So,
You know what? I've said it before and I'll say it again. I want to play like a classic fantasy RPG that is DM'd by the guy who does the voice lines in Darkest Dungeon, because that would be the best thing ever. That's it. That's all I've got. That's all I want. Please.
I think, yeah, like maybe I would go that way, where it's just getting some like incredible actors, or people who are able to embody so many different characters at once around. So yeah. I don't know, like I feel like Donald Glover would be good, because like between Donald Glover the actor and Childish Gambino the rapper, like he seems, and like his TV shows, like he seems massively creative. I bet he'd make some really good RPG characters. I would then have maybe, obviously, if it could be anyone ever, then maybe like someone like David Bowie, because multiple, different personas, again, clearly good at making different characters.
I mean, I was assuming we weren't allowed dead people.
But it says
otherwise
anyone.
It
says anyone ever. Anyone ever.
I would have said David Bowie.
Yeah. So. Well, you took Kate Bush out from under me, because like Kate Bush was also on the tick list. Yeah, I don't know. And then yeah, maybe just folks like that, like really good creative. But then you'd probably feel, I would get massive imposter syndrome, sat around, like surrounded by brilliantly creative, talents across stage, screen, and music.
I think I'd also want to play Monikers with Willem Dafoe. Because I just want to see his face, like, do the expressions and stuff.
Oh no, he's pulled the Antichrist card.
Oh god. No. I just want to...
He's only allowed to use one word to describe things, but he keeps just saying Winslow. Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Let's do one more quick one. Wills, would you like to read this one from Katie, please?
Can do. Hi, Dicebreaker team. Apologies if this has already been asked.
It has not.
Don't worry, Katie, because I'll probably use answers that have already been said. How long until we need a D&D 5.5 edition, or even a 6e? With all the unearthed arcana and new source books fixing some of the issues for the system, surely players are at a disadvantage with having to piece together a lot of the peripheral texts. I know I feel this way myself. Would a new 6e be better to just address all the problems of the game, including the core classes, racial abilities, and inherently evil races? Thanks again for your great content, Katie. Yeah, so this is something we kind of talked about on the other episode, right? Because we were talking about the Cauldron of Everything, is that what it's called? The supplement book.
Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they are kind of retroactively fixing things by just shoving them in books that you have to buy, which I'm sure is a very good business tactic, but when it comes to actually doing the right thing, it probably isn't great.
For clarity, they have said that the elements of the racial traits, being able to edit them or take them out altogether, will be available other ways. Just before we land ourselves in hot water with Wizards of the Coast.
That's fine. Yeah.
But they haven't necessarily specified exactly how they will be available, but it sounds like they will be available outside the book.
And don't quote me on it, just in case it's not true. I believe...
Writing it down as we speak, yeah.
I believe They will be available on Unearthed Arcana, which is for free. It's a website that you can visit to check out some of the new updates to the 5th edition. However, I'm in complete agreement with particularly the stuff that Katie mentions, which is the changes to racial traits and the alteration to certain races, such as the Drow, who before fairly recently were pretty much a straight up evil race, and it's not a good look. It's not nice for people who want to, play the game and not have to think about, one of the races being just inherently evil.
Especially when they are kind of allegorical to people of colour.
They're
the really horrible part.
Yeah, they're known as the Dark Elves. Also, same with things like orcs and stuff like that. It's like, So I think just for that sake, I think there should be a new edition to compile all of that together into a player's handbook. Like, I think with the changes they're making now, I think that stuff is so much more important than just like modifiers and whatever. Like, just changing the approach of the RPG to subjects like race is like really important. Yeah, I think they should just have a new edition for that.
I will say that I don't know if now that we're getting to the stage where, because D&D is so flipping popular now, and it's like, I don't know how many people, if I wanted them to play D&D, right, if I said I think you'd really love D&D, I wouldn't want to say buy these 8 books, buy the player's handbook and the GM's handbook, or whatever, buy all of these things and then play it. And then also you have to read all of them, and then one of you has to know all the rules better than the others so they can help and all that kind of stuff. I would much rather just be like, just make a D&D Beyond account and go make a character on that and just use a laptop. Like, I know that kind of puts people who maybe don't have the tech available to a disadvantage, but I do think, like, why... I know this is how they make money. They make books, and that's how they make money. But I do think that to look at it from just like a user like practicality kind of viewpoint, it's much easier to have a fluid rule system online, almost like a sort of video games as a service model where things are just constantly being updated and tweaked and stuff. And having, like D&D Beyond is really good for like beta testing and all that kind of stuff, where they can play test little bits that they're thinking about adding.
I would say you still need to know how to navigate that, and like, even I know it's pretty intuitive from what I've experienced, but like, there are still some things that I can struggle to find on there, and I do think if they released a PDF version of a new player handbook, that would be much easier, because then you could just scroll down to this page, or like search for this word, and you'd probably be able to find what you wanted a lot easier.
Well, it's kind of like how it's kind of like how KeyForge do that, where it's like, yes, if you get a starter pack, it comes with a rule set.
Yeah.
But that's basically the basic rules. If you want the fundamental, like, here is every single rule, you go online and there's a PDF that gets updated every time they change something, because they know that, like, it's not a perfect system that we have in Tabletop, where you produce a rule book and then you realize it's wrong 4 weeks later because people have actually been playing it. And then you have to either release a brand new edition of the game, which means that you need to buy a new product just to play the game that you got, which doesn't work properly, or you need to have some kind of rules errata online that no one's going to read. So I feel like having like a digital version of the rule set which does update and does actually have like a sort of constantly changing and being tweaked and stuff, you don't have to have this issue where it's like, hey, we fixed that problem with our rules kind of being racist, but we put it in a book that costs $50. It's like, well, like, that's kind of not good enough. And it's like, I feel like you've already got the systems in place to try and like fix that. And it's, that's just why I know it's not a perfect replacement, and I know there are problems that the digital platform has that the books don't, and vice versa. But it does seem to me, and it seems like they are kind of maybe leaning that way anyway, it does seem to me like the more practical thing for players, maybe not as a business, but for players, is to go digital and start leaning towards that D&D Beyond platform.
Yeah.
Because I will not play D&D with a paper character sheet anymore. It's awful. I hate it. I'm not going to do it anymore. Like, I would... D&D Beyond is absolutely fine. I think it's genuinely quite a nice website and it works really well. And maybe they still need to update it to make it full, like, idiot-proof, but it's just so much. It's leagues better than using those horrible 4 A4 sheets of paper character sheets.
I think with...
I also would say I think it would make a statement if there was a new edition and they were like straight off from it. Okay, these are the big changes we've made. I think because a new edition is exciting. I think. I'm not saying that they should, release it in a really expensive book, but I mean that's what they would do. But I just think that a new edition with those changes would make a huge impact. Like culturally as well.
Yeah, I think it's just language, isn't it? Really, because it's like if we were looking at video games as an allegory for it, like they would say, "Oh, we've done a big update, like a big patch or whatever."
It's not the same as here's the new edition of D&D, like.
Because that's basically what an edition is, right? It's just a big update, a big patch. It's still the same game. They've just changed things and put new art on it and all that kind of stuff.
What were you going to say, Matt Jarvis?
Well, I think you two kind of covered it. I was just going to say it's been interesting the last few years particularly. There's like an animosity toward companion apps and things like that. But you're seeing it more and more. And I think the reason is because it's, board games are, even RPGs, are big, heavy books. They cost money to ship around. They cost money to manufacture. And then they're instantly outdated, like Will said. So like you're seeing, I think X-Wing, the second edition of X-Wing did it where the point values for certain ships weren't on cards, they were on an app. I think Warhammer's going a similar way. There are like multiple miniatures games that are doing similar things.
Infinity does that as well, where it's just like they have like an online army builder.
Yeah, exactly, right.
They can fluctuate.
Because I don't know, is the truth, but I wonder how many people realistically... D&D is very popular, but D&D is popular to the degree where people like watching actual plays, and people... There are people that still buy all the books, but I would suspect that is a tiny fraction of the number of people that are interested in D&D, and most people will get the free PDF, like beginner rules, whatever it's called, and for them that's probably about enough. I don't think they will be going out, and maybe D&D Beyond is then like an easier step in because it's like a lot of it is free, and then you can kind of buy piecemeal and it's much easier to browse. Obviously there are accessibility things around. And, if it costs a monthly fee, that's also something else to consider. But I think it's much easier for them to update. It's probably they make a lot more of the money out of the subscription because they're not having to ship a load of books around and kind of estimate demand. So I wonder whether we'll see the core rules become, like you were both saying, like this evolving service where at some point maybe it just loses the 5e and it just becomes Dungeons and Dragons on D&D Beyond. There are your cool rules, and maybe they put out physical editions of specific campaigns because they won't be necessarily outdated. It will just be a case of, okay, here is a self-contained story or a self-contained world. Maybe there are QR codes to scan for the latest like monster stats or wherever it may be. So there's that tie in there, and they get you back into D&D Beyond. But you also get the pleasure of having a physical book that you can crack out for that campaign, and then once you're done, you put it on the shelf. But the rules themselves live as this evolving kind of thing.
Yeah.
It'd be really interesting to see. I don't know. But you look at like Magic the Gathering, where with the latest sets, it seems like they're pushing people toward Magic the Gathering Arena for the tutorial rather than having a play sheet in the box itself. And for them, there's probably a benefit in terms of like data capture and all that kind of background admin stuff. They know exactly how many people are playing. They know what people are going to spend. They can keep track of who's playing. There are so many benefits to digital, whereas if you send a load of books out, it's expensive, it's slow, you've got to store them somewhere, you don't know who's buying them or when they're buying them or who you're really aiming at. So I think in the long term, we'll probably see a shift more and more towards digital. But it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, it would be nice to see some changes that go beyond like supplemental stuff, where it actually changes the problematic kind of elements at the core of that game rather than just around the edges. But I'm afraid we're going to have to draw to a close because I have to hop off very soon, and we are running up on time because that's how this podcast works. You naturally overrun. But before we leave you, I should say, if you've got a question for the podcast, you can email podcast@dicebreaker.com, which is what I forgot to say earlier. Or you can find us on @joindicebreaker on Twitter, or you can find us at dicebreaker.com or youtube.com/dicebreaker.
We're everywhere.
Speaking of YouTube, Wheels, what do we have coming up on the video side?
Well, Matt, I'm glad you asked. So this podcast will be going out on the Friday, and coming directly after that, you should see some of the content that we did with Cody for our Cyberpunk RPG coming up that weekend, which is very exciting. We will also have already posted our Jiangxi Let's Play, which myself, Meehan, and Loli's played with Senfun Lim, who is also the designer of Junkart, who you may remember, and Banana-chan, who wrote that game together. So look out for that on the channel. And then the week after, coming up, EGX and PAX are kicking off. It's coming. It's here.
Right, Wheels. PAX Online and EGX Digital are running from September 12th to 20th. They are organised by ReadPop, which is the company that owns Dicebreaker, which is why we chat about them quite a bit, and we are involved. So as Will said, we're playing Cyberpunk with Cody Pondsmith. We've got a panel on board games with some fantastic guests. We've got a session on how to play, or how to run an amazing RPG session with some more guests, guests galore. We've got a few live streams. We've got, there's a lot going on over the next 9 days of PAX Online and EGX Digital. And speaking of EGX Digital, we have an exclusive bit of merch, which Alex Meehan, for the eagle-eyed viewers on YouTube, has been rocking this whole time. A Tim the Goblin t-shirt featuring such iconic phrases as...
Oh my goodness.
Oh, you didn't even do the voice.
Tim the Goblin from...
Oh, what?
You may remember Tim the Goblin from such shows as Dungeon Breaker, Dungeon Breaker Season 2.
I didn't hear what Matt said.
You didn't do the voice, although I don't know if you can do it without the fake fangs in.
Yeah, you need to be spitting something out as you talk to be Tim the
Yeah,
Goblin.
this is true. I've got stage fright now, so I don't...
That's quite all right. So yes, that is a limited edition exclusive bit of merch, which you can find on the EGX store today. So if you want some of that, head on over. You may have also noticed I'm rocking part of our summer merch, which is this very, very soft zip hoodie, which is very comfortable.
The hoodie
genuinely,
is so
it's
nice.
really good.
I really need a drink, Matt Jarvis.
Delicious. I'm just going to drink my paint water if you don't mind. Yum.
Yes, bottles and mugs also available, along with t-shirts and all sorts. So yeah, head on over to dicebreaker.myshopify.com if you want to check out some of that. And on dicebreaker.com over the next week, obviously we will be very busy with PAX and EGX. So you'll find us there, but we will have already up is a piece on kind of playing RPGs online during obviously this pandemic that continues to roll on by Ki-Hoon Chan, who spoke to some players of RPGs who've taken their games online. And it's a really interesting look into kind of, like, you can run an RPG over the web, but there are still drawbacks to not being in the same room as people, being able to kind of gel, and the atmosphere and just immediacy of it. It's a really, really lovely piece. So I'd recommend checking it out. Next week, we have a thing that I've written here only as Super Secret Alex Meehan game, which is the game that Meehan you mentioned earlier, which you can say nothing about, but that will be going live next
Pain
week
of death.
sometime.
Oh, yeah.
So look out for that. There'll be a couple of things about that. So check it out. You've also got a feature coming up on D&D cosplay, which is very good because I've read it.
Yes, it's months in the making.
Yeah.
But yeah, I spoke to some D&D cosplayers. It's really interesting about what they do, why they do it, and yeah.
Fantastic. So lots to look forward to. Like I say, check out the YouTube, which is .com/Dicebreaker, dicebreaker.com, and of course, PAX Online and EGX Digital. But for now, having plugged all that we can plug, it is time for us to leave you for this week. We'll be back next Friday with another episode of the Dicebreaker podcast. Until then, thank you, Alex Meehan.
Ah!
Thank you, Wills.
You're welcome.
You were more
Nice.
Tim-like in that than you were before. I've been Matt Jarvis. Thank you all for listening and have a lovely day. Bye.